with a very, very special guest, two guests, but one's really a co-host. It's Sia and Nejad Sports. It's Stack of Stats. Of course, everybody knows Pamela Maldonado because we just had an amazing conversation just a few days ago. Speaking of amazing, one of the most amazing poker players, but amazing outside of poker too. Maybe we'll find out during this particular episode. None other than Daniel Negreanu. So happy that you're here.
Well, I'm glad to be here, and I wanted to share one little piece of information that every single Nejad I know in the world is like a great television personality. And there's two. There's you, and of course there's Ali, who does a lot of the poker stuff. That's it. That's all I got. So I don't know if it's in your blood or what.
What a great segue, because I played in the main event World Series of Poker in 2018, the first and last time I played. I'll play again, but that was my first time. I cashed, Daniel. I'm so glad you brought this up. But here's the funny part. Before I even got to sit down in the main room, you were also in that main room at the featured table. I was kind of off to the side in that main room for day one. And that year I was on day 3 of day 1. But I saw Ali Nejad, who of course didn't know who I was. I interrupted a conversation he was having with some guy in a suit that looked pretty important. And I handed him my ticket to the WSOP main event. And he's kind of stunned that I interrupted him. And I felt bad about it. He looks at it and he's like, yeah, you're registered for the tournament. And I'm like, no, we share the same last name. So the cool part was he would kind of like go around the whole event over the 4 days that I was playing. And he'd stop at where he saw me, and he would, talk to me and give me pep talks and stuff like that. So really great guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Big fan of Ali and yours as well.
Yours.
Appreciate it. And Pamela, I know you go way back with Daniel Negreanu. We talked about this with your Vegas days, right?
Right. Yes. So I came from Poker Media, and so I have interviewed, chatted with, and became friendly with Negreanu for years and years, to the point where he was so gracious to lend me his golf coach. So that way I can so I could become as close to a scratch golfer as I could before I left Vegas and moved to Austin. So forever grateful for that experience, because I achieved everything. I ticked every box in Vegas for golf before I left. So thanks, Negreanu.
No, keyword was loan, because I needed him back.
Yes. I never got to keep him, but he helped me out in the interim, and it was a lot of fun. I played every single course in Las Vegas and around the area, and it was in partly because of him. I wanted to crush every course, and I did.
Except one. There's one in my backyard called Six Aces.
Oh, okay. Well, where's the invite, man?
Well, that's right. Yeah. So you got to work your way up to that one, though. That's
yeah. And Daniel, you live in Vegas currently, right?
I have been in Vegas for over 20 years now, well over, like 25 years.
So one thing that struck me, and I think this is a good place to start, because for those of you that are watching that don't know, we want to talk maybe a little bit of poker. I'm sure there's a poker story or two that we're going to have when we have this discussion. But Daniel, like, the really important thing for me when I have people like Pamela on last week and other guests that I've had is kind of finding out who the person, like you in my estimation, I know how humble you are, but you're sort of at the top of that poker mountain. Maybe you don't think you're at the very top, but I think we can all kind of understand that you're pretty darn close, if not at the very, very top. So my point is I kind of want to know about the man behind that, and maybe the work ethic and the habits that formed, and frankly, some of the adversity that you faced where, things didn't really go your way, and how you kind of rebounded from that. And the reason I want to talk about that is because the whole point of Sia and Nejad Sports is to arm people with the tools that maybe they can use from this show or a previous show and say, hey, maybe I can apply that to my life. Maybe it's not poker, of course. Maybe it's something with their own occupation or their family, but that's sort of where this show, that's where the goal of this show is. But I got to ask you, just from the top, you're such a friendly guy, but you're also friendly at the poker table. I find that really interesting, because you could vouch for the fact that probably 90% of the people that are at the poker table with you, especially the guys at your level, they can be cantankerous, they can be intimidating, they can be just not affable or just sociable like you are. How do you maintain that? Because to a lot of people, it's like maybe you're giving information away, but also you can't zone in when you're friendly like Daniel Negreanu.
Well, here's the thing. I'm a big believer in authenticity, and whatever works for you works for you. And poker is, a lot of people drawn to poker are those types of people that you talked about, very to themselves and quiet and reserved and really want to focus. That's not who I am in my regular life. So for me, translating that to the poker table is just natural, right? So now what happens is I'm in my element. I'm talking, I'm chatting or whatever. And those others maybe you're out of their element, especially if the cameras are on, when I'm on a TV table or whatever the case may be. So it kind of works hand in hand. It's just naturally who I am. And I found a way over the years to benefit from it, by getting to know people a little bit better, chit chatting. You ask somebody, well, what do you do for a living? Okay, well, I'm a defense lawyer. So my thought is, all right, this guy bluffs because that's what he does, like, for a living, right? And then the next side, what do you do? I'm a Sunday school teacher. Maybe she's uncomfortable with lying and bluffing. So who knows? You know what I mean? There's like subtle little things you can learn about people just by getting to know them outside of the game.
It's like you read my bio, Daniel, because I'm also a defense attorney. I don't practice law anymore, but for 13 years, it was civil defense, mind you. So that perhaps that's a different ilk of defense. But no, I see. No, I absolutely see your point there. I do still think it's incredible how approachable you are. I mean, I just think that's something that is unique to the poker world. And I know, Pamela, you can testify to that because you were in poker media for a handful of years and you were really deeply engrossed in it. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but Daniel Negreanu is kind of a needle in a haystack when it comes to that, right?
I would say that there's more than a few people in the poker industry who are needle in a haystack. There's a few of them. But yes, I'll blow some steam to you, Daniel. One of the things that I've always said and vouched for was who you see on TV is exactly who you see in person. And that's one of the things that I've always respected, not just with you, but the people who do take the time. Doesn't matter what table you're on. It doesn't matter the stakes. If somebody wanted a photograph while you're in the hand, maybe not exactly in the hand, but on a table, you go off to the side and you photograph every person and you autograph and you say hi and you say hello. And that's just always appreciated. And that's something that's it's so undervalued, not just in poker, but like in society now, because we are so glued to like, nobody knows how to be personable and human anymore. So it's like, you have no idea how easy it is just to say hi to somebody. Oh, and it changes their entire day. And so that's one of the things that I appreciated most about you from the poker media perspective, because my job was to see everything. So I got to see it on the sidelines pretty often. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to share a cute story about that too. But before I get to the story, so for me, it's always been important because I realize, like, this person that drove in from Montana, they're going to see me and they're going to see me one time, right? So whatever impression they have of me is going to be based on that short interaction that I have with them, right? And if I'm having a bad day, I have to realize that someone in my position, I don't really get to have a bad day with them. I can go to my room later and freak out and, be upset. But in that moment, it's important for me to sort of give them a good opportunity. And I want to tell you the cute story because this one is interesting to me. And sorry if I'm killing your show, but I think this
no format whatsoever. No format whatsoever.
Yeah, I had a woman come to me. She was on the rail. And she came up and she was drinking a Coca-Cola, and for lack of better, I don't know the proper way to say this, but she was overweight, a little bit overweight, right? Or she was overweight, okay? And so I just chatted with her a little bit. I said, "What's that in your hand?" And she said, "Oh, that's a Coca-Cola." I said, that stuff's no good for you, da da da. And so then we talked a little bit, and she mentioned she quit smoking. And I said, "I'll bet you $10, okay, $10. You come back next year, but you can't quit for 1 year, okay?" So I didn't think much of it. She laughed. She sort of giggled. And then a year later, at the World Series, and some other woman came up to me, right? This different woman who was lean, thin, looked athletic. And she said, "Do you remember me?"
Oh, my God.
And I said, "No, I'm sorry." She says, "Well, a year ago, you bet me $10 that I wouldn't quit smoking. I quit smoking. I quit drinking soda. My kids, when I told them about it, said, 'Mom, you should do it.' So I took the $10 out of my pocket, handed it to her. And it's like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like a little seed. I had a 2-minute conversation, and I'm not saying I'm the entire reason she changed her life, but I feel responsible for a little bit of a spark, and that's worth it for me.
That's amazing. And I really love that about not you just in person, but I also love that that's what like Twitter. Yes, I'm talking about people who are stuck to their phones, but also like the whole Twitter aspect. One of the things that I did when I was in poker media was I was able to converse before before anybody even knew me in media. I was able to converse with people in poker, the people who I thought were stars, the people who I thought were like really looked up to, and stories like you, like I would have like died to talk to somebody. And then you can on Twitter now. And it's just like, it's amazing that these people, everyone's just human. And so everyone just wants to interact and have that story. Man, that is such a great story. I'm glad you shared that with us.
Yeah, it really can be the spark. Like the spark can be the whole thing. So you might not want to take ownership of why it happened, but the reality is without that spark, without that conversation, she probably comes back in the same form she did the year before. So I mean, I think people, whether it's somebody famous like yourself or whether it's just a casual person on the street, a simple conversation, a simple hello, a simple thank you, a simple looking in somebody's eyes and saying thank you or whatever it is, I think that goes a long way day to day. And I just feel like a lot of people just fail to do it because they're just
I think it's more difficult now, right? And Pamela, you're a gym goer, so you would understand this. I mean, there's a sort of this new kind of phenomenon of, people being at the gym and filming, and like filming other people looking at them. And it's like, you realize you have a camera in their face and they're glancing over at you, right? So there's this, like, I think there's a fear in the society we live in because everyone's hiding behind social media to just go up and say hello, right? Because like in work environments, if you say the wrong thing, well, that you go to HR and you said, I love your hair today, which is something I would say to a guy or a girl. But in the wrong environment, you say something that, used to be considered just friendly, now can be perceived in a way that puts people, I think, on edge and makes it a little more difficult. Also, as a practice, if everybody's typically engaging on social media, this is the new way. So it's much more difficult to like go to an event or something and say, hi, my name's Daniel. Who are you? And just more difficult, as Pamela said.
I would say that I went to I went to a singles event a couple days ago. My girlfriend was, her, Ebony Kenny. She's a professional poker player. She was named one of Austin's most eligible singles in the city, only one of 11 people. And I'm in this environment of all these singles, and I come from poker media. I come from media. I come from like being present. I'm, on camera. And so I'm very personable. I could not engage in a single conversation with anybody. Everybody forgot how to talk. And I was just like, what happened? And I haven't been in this type of environment in so long. So it's kind of the same thing of like, everyone feels comfortable with their phone cameras, but they don't actually feel comfortable with a person in front of them anymore. Do you feel like that's changed? I mean, you've been in poker for how long? Like decades. So like you went from like not having phones, not having, Skype and Zoom calls and all of this to what do you think has like changed, especially seeing the up and coming poker players now? What do you think the transition has been as far as like technology and like human interaction, and what have you seen and what do you perceive of it and where are we headed with it?
Yeah. So obviously social media connects us, right? It connects everybody across the world. And there are a lot of aspects that are pretty awesome about it, but we can't lie and pretend that there's not some negative as well. Simple discourse, right? Stuff that I will read on Twitter about myself from people who are hiding behind a keyboard and will say really nasty things that in conversation with them at the table, they would never say, they would never think to say, they wouldn't be brave enough to say. When people disagree on Twitter, it's pointless, right? I'm going to make my point and not listen to you and then continue to make mine. But notice that when you're actually listening to a person and talking to them in person, you say, okay, so I see what you're saying, and then you sort of have like a normal conversation. So I'm a little concerned about just the way in which people like engage now. I've done my best over the last few years to just sort of not engage in Twitter back and forths because they really suck the energy out of you. And I've actually changed my Twitter so that, how they like on the top, you can pin lists. There's that For You button. For you is the poison, okay? For you, anytime I look at the For You, it's for you to get angry, right? I'll see some takes on there of something awful that happened and something I disagree with, all stuff designed to get me riled up, right? So just like being aware of that and learning that, but I do have a concern about the next generation. And in terms of like, think of this, like any thoughts that you have now, you put out in the world. So when I was a young kid starting out in poker, I might've seen some of the older guys and that they're not so hot. I could take these guys, but I didn't tweet it because there was no Twitter. So I may say it to a person or two, but now I put that out in the world. That person sees it. It becomes a story. Now I have a beef and it's not healthy.
It becomes a meme on Instagram. It becomes this whole 10 stories are made because of one tweet. You can't do anything nowadays. This is why I don't engage either.
It's tough. I mean, you really have to kind of, make sure you almost censor what you tweet in a sense, because it really can develop, especially if you're, a bigger personality like yourself, Daniel, and you too, Pamela. I completely get that.
I'd say in the last 2 months, I've had 20 really good, funny jokes that I wrote out. And I was like, you know what? Can't send it because I don't want to deal with the 7 people who are going to read into it and find something to be offended by when it's clearly just a joke. So then I just realized it's not worth it, which is a shame too, right? Because then you're sort of curbing a little bit about your own, personality, if you will.
It goes
It's true.
beyond even just like it's sending out a tweet though. It's even like things that you like either on Twitter or Instagram. I'm always like, well, I can't like this because somebody's going to see that I liked it and now they're going to know deep dark secrets of my soul that I don't want them to know about.
Yeah, that's what
There's
I'm
just
like secretly when I don't want to engage in stuff, but I sort of want people to know where I stand. I'm like, I'm gonna like a bunch of these tweets.
and that's all you can do nowadays is like, okay, like
You get in trouble for that. I've definitely got people saying, "You like this guy's tweet? This guy said the word Nazi and Hitler," and I'm like,
oh
"Oh,
my
God,
god.
I didn't know about his."
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Uh, Daniel, let me ask you this because one thing that struck me when you talked about the story with the lady who came back much lighter and presumably happier. You talked about drinking soda and she was a cigarette consumer as well. You have some healthy habits from what I understand, and I'm just curious. The habits that you have just day to day, do they translate into you being a better poker player? And what are those habits?
I think they absolutely do because first, one of the things people don't realize about poker is sometimes we're sitting there for 14, 15 hours a day, 4 days in a row, like 6, 7, 8 days in a row. And that can be mentally exhausting. And if you're not physically fit, that could be more problematic in the crucial hours at 1 a.m. when you really need to be sharp. So as far as pattern, habits that I have, I'm a vegan. I have been for 20 years now. So I try to eat healthy. I became enamored with cooking about 3 years ago, since COVID, really. And I love to cook. I also work out, but I go sort of through like ebbs and flows with that. So the World Series is in June. I'm training now, no joke, for the World Series. I'm going to get my body into really good shape for the start of the World Series because I know once the World Series happens, that all goes out the window. Bring me chocolate, bring me candy, bring me popcorn, bring me whatever I need. I'll put on about 8, 10 pounds and, fun fat because I do know that I have the discipline that when it's over, 6 to 8 weeks, I know a program that works for me and I'm able to do that. So that's how I prepare. I prepare beforehand. I know a lot of guys like to try to work out during, and I've tried that. Problem is the number one most important factor for success in poker for me is sleep. If I'm not rested, I'm useless.
Yeah, and Pamela and I had that conversation last week too. When it comes to bodybuilding and really whatever the endeavor is, if you don't let your body rest, you're not letting your brain rest either, of course. But that can lead to just a lot of trouble. And in the poker world, I would imagine that leads to how is the sleeping though? Because here's the problem with poker and really a lot of jobs, but especially some of the stuff that I'm in personally, where I bet a lot and give out some betting advice too, and that can be really deflating. You can really have moments, and I know, Daniel, throughout your career, you've had some amazing moments. You've won a ton of money, but you've also had some really deflating moments way back in the day where I understand you had to kind of go back to Toronto from Vegas. And then even recently with some of the World Series of Poker stuff, how do you deal with that type of adversity? Because whether it's short-term or long-term, because there's got to be coping mechanisms to actually overcome that. I just don't know what they are.
Yeah. Well, I would say, again, I think for me, the reason I've been able to be successful is one word, and that's resilience. The ability to get kicked in the head over and over and over and wake up every morning and say, I'm ready to do this again. So my process typically is this. I'm a big believer in if you try to put things down here in your belly, they don't go away. I think it's important, first and foremost, to experience the experience you're experiencing, right? So what I'll do is after a bad session or things have gone bad, I will vent to myself. I will say, I mean, this stupid idiot over there, he doesn't know what he's doing. He played a 9 and a 3 offsuit and cost me my money. And what am I going to do? And I allow myself to sulk, if you will, right? I feel the experience. And then next thing I'll do is I'll actually be present to what am I physically feeling? My heart's racing, my feet are tapping, my blood is boiling. What am I feeling? Anger in this moment, right? And then I let that subside. And then I say, okay, what do I want to choose now going forward? I want to choose to be focused. I want to choose to be engaged. I want to be determined, and I want to be at my best, right? And with practice, that works faster and faster. But resilience is not something that is easily attainable for a lot of people. And in poker, for example, if you play poker tournaments, you play 100 tournaments, 98 times, 99 times, you're going to lose all of your chips. You're going to get knocked out and lose and lose and lose. So that can be really difficult for your average person.
I've always said that people always ask me, because I'm in sports betting now, and people always ask me like, oh, you seem like you're so successful. I have lost, when I first got into betting, I lost a lot of money because I was non-disciplined. I didn't know what I was doing. I knew how to talk about information and talk about a line and whatever, but I didn't yet have the mental capacity to handle it. I told him, if you want to get good at sports betting, you have to play poker because you're going to learn really quickly what it's like to lose a lot of money in a matter of seconds and what it's like to win a lot of money. And then, of course, be disciplined to build up a bankroll. So I always attribute my success in sports betting from poker. Do you think that the two are so related? Because I know you yourself got into sports betting as well for hockey. So I know my relationship with it. What's your relationship with the two intertwining?
No, they're definitely tied. And I started betting sports when I was in my teens and, booking and betting and all that stuff as a kid in Toronto. But there's definitely a lot of parallels. And the one thing that you learn from one from the other is that sometimes you will do the exact right thing and still lose, right? You play poker. I put all my money in with a pair of aces, which is the best hand. Somebody puts it in with a pair of jacks. I'm 82% to win. But guess what? 18% happens sometimes, right? So even when you like with sports, obviously there's many games I've had where I had the right side, I was getting like plus 300 on a hockey game and it went to overtime, went to a shootout, right? And, I happened to lose the shootout. But it's really important to sort of focus on the journey and the decisions rather than the result. And that's difficult for people, right? Because a lot of people are short-term thinkers, right? So with poker, an analogy might be somebody folds a king and a 4, which isn't a good hand. And they look at the flop and it was king, king, 4 and think, I should have played that. No, you shouldn't have played that because that's not the right play. Or, you see an upset that happened in sports and you're like, I should have bet on them. Like, no, you shouldn't. That was a miracle. That was going to lose 9 out of 10, So also too, there's the issue of tilt and steam, right? In poker, when you're losing, it's very easy to fall into a trap of just, playing to chase the money. And I know a guy who bets sports, and I remember, he was always in the chase mode, right? Like, he couldn't just put the brakes on. So he liked 3 games and those didn't go well. He'd find a 4th game that he didn't really like, but he thought, well, this is my shot to get even. So that's sort of discipline, like you said, and really just, I think, having a plan, trusting your numbers, trusting your system, whatever that is. If you have a model or whatever, look at it, have faith in it and, make whatever tweaks you have, but do so from a place of, calm knowledge rather than anger and chasing and lack of discipline.
Did it take you a while to cultivate the manner in which you deal with adversity? In other words, you've been at this for quite some time now. And I'm just wondering, did you always have that in you to vent to yourself and to just be able to dismiss it the next day? Or is it something that over the years you've kind of grew some calluses, if you will, and now you're able to deal with it in a much better way? And the only reason I ask is because I think there are people out there that are listening or are going to listen, and they're going to be like, well, yeah, that's easier said than done, but I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can get over it that quick. And I'm just wondering where you're at on their perspective.
I'll tell you what, it's a really interesting question because it's sort of something I always did, like instinctively. But as I got older, I started to learn the mechanics behind it and started to learn like, oh no, this is a real thing. Like this is actually going to help me and I'm actually going to enhance it and do it better. And one of the things that I do is I have a little coaching session with myself. I'll go over, I'm like, all right, I had a goal. I didn't reach it. What worked? What are the things that I did that worked? Okay, going to sleep early, eating right. What didn't work? What are some things that I can fine tune? And what are some things that I can work on for the next goal? Or maybe, if it's a fitness goal or something, okay, maybe if I didn't reach it, let's look at the plan. Did I need to eat less calories? Did I need to lift more? And there's always that, internal dialogue of saying, all right, be honest with yourself. Even when you win, I think, it's important to say, all right, what worked? What could I have done better? What could I have done differently? And that's where I'm a big believer that mistakes can be the most valuable thing in the world. Like you call it like a breakdown in your life. You call it a breakdown, a mistake. The mistake is not learning anything from it, right?
Yeah.
But if you have these things that go wrong in your life or mistakes you make, and you really have a moment to be introspective about it, so that the next time you're faced with a similar situation, you go, I'm too smart for that. I'm not going to do something stupid here because I know better.
I don't take L's. I take lessons.
Nice.
That's a great way to redefine the L. I love that.
So I love that you said that, though, that you do coaching sessions with yourself, because one of the things that I like to iterate in sports betting is if you want to bet, cool, go back and think of why it worked out. If you lost a bet, cool, go back and think of why it lost. Because you said it earlier, like, okay, you made a bet on something. Were you lucky, or is your reasoning for taking that exactly why it worked out? And vice versa. Did you get unlucky by a mixed extra point or whatever in football? And that's why you just like narrowly missed out on your bet. So I translated a lot to poker. Again, I always go through hand histories in tournaments and cash games. I write it down on a piece of paper, hand for hand, what happened and what the person had and what he was looking, whatever. Write my notes, and then I go back and I study. Why aren't people doing that also in sports betting? And this is why I say it's so tied to poker as well, because you should be doing hand histories with your sports bets and figuring out why it worked and why it didn't, so you can be better for the next one. So I really do love that you said coaching session with myself, what worked and what didn't, and then review from there.
I want to quote you because I was listening to a podcast recently. I think it was forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong. It was Lex Friedman. You did what was it, a year ago or so? You did some sort of show with him, and you said something that really struck me. And it was, you have to have the humility to be introspective. And for the record, I think that applies to sports betting, but it applies to life as well. And I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about from the outset with people not being able to engage. I think people have an inability to be introspective. They just don't, they literally can't bring themselves to take the time, whether they're talking politics or sports or whatever it is, take the time to be introspective. And I wonder, I find you to be, and I like to think of this, of myself in this context to some degree as well, in terms of being really highly analytical at a poker table. I wonder if it's your analytical skills on the poker table that have also provided you something outside of the poker table from a perspective and empathy standpoint. And again, maybe I'm just making a false parallel here, but it seems to me that you're so analytical at the table, just identifying every little nuance that is occurring. I feel like that gives you an ability to, outside of the table, kind of appreciate where other people are, where their perspective lies. Am I wrong there? Am I reaching?
No, you bring up a lot of good points, specifically at the beginning of what you said, which is that, people find it difficult to be introspective because they're not being honest with themselves. And one of the reasons for that is it's the sort of, I don't know if it's the contrast of like being fully responsible for everything that happened versus just being a victim to circumstance, right? Mm-hmm. I can't tell you how many people like in poker that I was like, oh man, I lost with pocket eight. All they got is these bad stories that were never their fault, right? Never you, right? No, people don't want to own it. Like the dealer was unlucky for me, or they push blame other places. But here's the thing. If you live your life that way, and it is easy, it's an addicting sort of experience to just be a victim to stuff because then you're off the hook. But there's no power in it, right? If you're telling me there's nothing you could do, well, shrug. What do I got for you? I got nothing to help you with. But if you come at it from a different perspective and say to me, you know what? So I ultimately lost with the aces, but I wonder if there were things before that I could have done differently. Mm-hmm. Like, did I actually play the hand as best as I could? You know what? Even though that happened, I'm responsible for being in the situation in the first place. Now, sometimes you're going to have bad luck and, get knocked out anyways. But as long as you look back and go, you know what? No, I'm comfortable with what I did. I made the right decisions. I'm good with it. I stand responsible for my results. I'm always going to continue to do better. And that's, like I said, I mean, everyone, there's going to be moments where you're a victim to something, right? Mm-hmm. But always trying to have that like mindset of the word responsible is response-able, like if you break it down, which means mm-hmm. your ability to respond. So every event, if you think of it as neutral, any sort of emotion or any sort of positive or negative that's attached to it is all stuff that you're putting on it, right? It's just neutral until you decide what it is, and you can always choose how to respond to all types of situations. And unfortunately, a vast majority have fallen in the trap of, just blaming everything but me, right? Which again is the most powerless position. Because what am I supposed to do with that? If a poker student comes up to me and says, listen, I'm just really unlucky. I never win. So help me. I'm like, well, I mean, I believe you. You're unlucky. You can't win. What do you want me to do with that? Right? If you come to me with saying, listen, I want to improve. I think there are mistakes that I'm making and I want to fix those holes. Now we got something to work with. Now there's some introspection. Now there's some open dialogue. I'm not going to work with a guy who says, I'm just unlucky. Okay, well then find a job. What do you want from me?
And that's all tied to what you were saying, the coaching session with yourself, because you're saying the story and I'm thinking of like 10 scenarios of my friends right now where, well, this guy didn't call me back. Well, what did you maybe do? Or maybe this chick didn't call me back. Well, what did you maybe do? Or the woman who a year ago, well, I never lost weight in a year. Well, what did you do in that year time span? It's always you're responsible for yourself and your actions. And it goes beyond sports betting, beyond poker. It's really just like be a coach to yourself in life because you can break down every moment and figure out what you did and didn't do. So I really do love that. Man, I'm writing so many notes. I'm like, I'm going to have to go back and like clip this for myself and like motivation.
That's the thing. I mean, and Daniel, that's sort of the point of this show, is to maybe like pull some tools. And I'm curious, you're pretty well versed in a lot, and maybe you don't think so, but from our vantage point, it looks like you're pretty well versed in, manners in which one can motivate. Is there somewhere where you kind of lean on? Is there a podcast you listen to? Is there a source where you kind of glean some of this stuff?
Well, first and foremost, I read some books and different things, but I did a course that was here in town in Las Vegas called Choice Center about 10 years ago. It's like an emotional intelligence workshop where you sort of like work on a lot of this stuff and you learn new ways to think. And, the lady who runs it, the first book she read, Rebecca recommended to me, was a simple book called The Four Agreements. It's a book written by Don Miguel Ruiz, and essentially it breaks down to 4 simple things to live a life that's worthwhile. And I'll give you the 4 because it's quite simple. Number 1 is be impeccable with your word to yourself and to others. Imagine you lived a life where you did everything that you said you're going to do, right? That's like right there, there's power. Number 2 is don't make assumptions, like Pamela was talking about. This person just didn't call me. He's like, reach out and say, hey, is there something that I did? Don't make assumptions. Number 3, don't take anything personal, really. Someone says, you're this, you're that. That's their opinion. It doesn't actually have to be true. And if you allow it to soak in, it hurts you. And number 4 sums up the other 3, importantly, and it's do your best. Okay. So you're going to fail at all 3 of those things occasionally, right? But just do your best. So let's say, for example, your word, you said, I'm going to run 5 miles a day, every day, right? Well, you wake up one day and you don't feel well. You're sick. Okay. Just do your best. If you're constantly doing your best and thinking about those things, it leads towards it's a responsible version or responsible way to live. So yeah, a lot of the work that I did was there at Choice Center, and I still am very friendly with the lady who runs it. And it was for me, in a lot of ways, it was actually life-changing because it really instilled a lot of these kind of concepts into my mind that I could translate to poker very easily.
And Pamela, I know you can attest to this, and it sounds super cliche, and I know it does, but truly, like, the path to success involves so much failure. If you're not failing, you're actually not on the right road to success. And I think, Pamela, you gave a really good example when we spoke last week with your back issues. Well, you actually gave a lot of examples, but when you hurt your back, like, that was in some senses a failure because you couldn't do what you wanted to do anymore, but you picked up, you rehabbed, you became a bodybuilder, an extremely successful one when you competed. And those are the things that I think a lot of people in those moments, they'd be like, well, I guess I just have a bad back. And sometimes, for the record, that's true. Okay. Mm-hmm. But there's also those other things you can do to motivate yourself to get past that. And that truly is, in my opinion, the path to actually succeeding at something.
Well, Daniel, that's why I want to ask you, like you're talking about right now, getting ready, you're training right now for the WSOP. You're 48 years old, and there's a lot of people, not that that's old. I said it in a way that it was.
Shots fired.
It's not old at all. 40 is the new 30. But there's just like a lot of people that I speak with or like send me a DM and they're like, oh, I'm already 50. I'm already 60. I'm already this age. I have this problem, this endurance. You're 48 and you're still mentally motivating yourself to do the hard work for the next few months because during the summer you're not going to be able to. Aside from books, aside from people, like what is it that you're doing for yourself to motivate you to get this type of physical achievement done in such a short span that's going to translate to somebody else who's maybe definitely not as in a better position because you're starting out with like you're still young, you're in a good physique, you have good health, but somebody else who's maybe not, and they're looking for a starting point. What is your advice to those for a starting point?
Yeah, well, I will say my end point is I'm a very anal and very regimented. Like, so when I come up with a plan, like I literally count calories. Like I cook myself, I measure everything, and I know exactly what I'm eating. I know I have a workout plan. So, and I have spreadsheets. I'm very nerdy in that regard, but I realize that's not something that is that introductory. That sounds too overwhelming for a lot of people. They're like, I don't know how to start there. So I think like the best approach really, it's that, what is that saying? Every 3,000-mile journey starts with the first step, right? It's that simple. I think it's just like adding one little new thing that you're going to do. So let's say you're going to take a 20-minute walk. And most of us, as long as your legs are working, you can do that, right? And what you'll find, I think, is when you start down that journey, and, Pamela obviously has reached the pinnacle of that journey, the more you do it, the more it becomes a habit and the more you want to add to it, right? It starts to become kind of like a positive addiction where you're like, oh my God, I'm starting to see results and I'm starting to really feel good and all those types of things. So I think like probably the first thing I would say to people is like, don't worry about my spreadsheets and my counting calories and all this kind of stuff. Start with something small that you can do each day that you're not doing now, right? And then as you start to get accustomed, comfortable with that being your new routine, add more stuff until you're doing it.
Yeah,
Well,
and what? Go ahead, Pamela.
No, go ahead. I was gonna kind of translate.
No, I was going to say one thing that we talked about on previous shows was holding yourself accountable by maybe writing that stuff down. And Daniel, I don't know if you do that as well. Maybe you just have the plan in your head and you execute it. But I think a lot of people have found, whether you're reading, a book like Atomic Habits or just talking to anybody who can consult on this, I think writing it down holds yourself accountable. Is that something you do, or you put it in your phone, or you just kind of have it in your head and you execute?
Always. I used to, well, I don't have it lately, but when blogs were a thing, when people actually wrote and read,
Yes.
I used to, every January, I would write 10 poker goals that I had in great detail, and I would share them publicly. So then, somewhat held accountable. And then at the end of the year, I'd look back. I wouldn't look at the goals all year. It was not something that I'm like, going to be drilled into. But at the end of the year, I would look back and say, all right, how successful was I? And then I would do the same process of what worked, what didn't work. Do I need to play more events? Do I, whatever the case may be. But as far as like from a fitness perspective, yeah, I have a spreadsheet that I dial in. Like before I usually, like I said, I have several programs that I do to mix it up. Like I create my own 6 to 8 week program, and I do something, like I said, quite anally. I create like a meal plan for myself where I have like 3 days that I just rotate. So I'll basically I have a meal 1, meal 2, meal 3. And on those days, I'll eat exactly the same thing. But I'm not eating the same thing every day. I'm eating the same thing every 4th day. But that also takes away one other problem, I think, for a lot of people. And a lot of successful people actually do this. Limiting the number of decisions you have to make in a day. It's done, right? I don't have to think about what I'm having for lunch. I don't have to think about what I'm having for dinner. I already have it. It's here. I just have to go, oh, it's this. And that can be a lot. That can be just one extra thing people can do to sort of plan ahead and alleviate, decision fatigue.
You and I are the same type of anal. I count every single one of my calories. I've even posted down to my almond count, switching out almonds, trying to get 6 grams. Nope, I can only do 6. So I switch out until I hit 6. And I'm the same way. I eat the exact same meals, but I do every single day. I love my food, so I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. I'm still eating tacos and pizza and whatever, but I'm eating the exact same meal, a portion amount every single day. And I don't have to think about what I'm doing tomorrow. I don't have to think about what I'm doing for dinner.
And I think a lot of people don't realize too, you can eat healthy and it can still be amazing. It still tastes really good. Like for lunch, I just had a vegan cheeseburger, basically, right? And that's in my macros. It's all counted, and it all fits in. You don't have to be so regimented where you're just eating, kale and broccoli with no dressing. God, shoot me.
Sticking on the same topic of motivation, just because I am so interested. You're 48. You've already accomplished so much in your life. You're about to do another WSOP. What is it? I mean, there's still a lot of people out there who are trying to find motivation. They're trying to find inspiration for either moving to the next job, moving to the next thing, start a family, whatever it is that they want to do and accomplish. With the amount of success you've already had, what even motivates you anymore?
First and foremost, I love it. And I think to be successful at something, a lot of people look at something and say, I want to do this. I'm like, why? Because I want to make a lot of money. I'm like, if that's your reason, you're probably not going to be successful. Yeah. Right? What typically happens is you love something so much, you become really good at it, the money shows up. But if money is your driving force, then it's not really what you love. So first and foremost, I love it. Secondly, I've always been self-motivated. I've never really needed a kick in the butt. I've always been very, very good at sort of goal setting. And I just love playing the World Series. I've won the Player of the Year award twice. No one else has 2. And I wanted to win 3 before anyone else did. And I had a crushing blow in 2019. This was sad because in 2019, I was crowned the World Player of the Year for the 3rd time. So I accomplished the feat. I was on the plane. I was so excited. 4 days later, they said, we made a mistake with the
calculated. I remember.
So I did not. So I basically didn't win. And,
So who got it?
The right guy won. Robert Campbell. He deserved it. He won. Nobody noticed. The count was off. And then all of a sudden we looked and we're like, oops, he actually won. I came in 3rd, actually. So, but yeah, so motivating myself has never been a struggle. I really enjoyed. Like this year, I'm even more motivated. I'm playing all the Poker Go Tour stuff, which is here locally. I don't really travel like I did. That's one thing that's changed in my life. I used to go from stop to stop. And I find that can be more difficult to live a balanced, healthy lifestyle. Traveling from city to city, you're not counting calories. It's not quite as easy, when you're not home. And so now my travel is minimal to none.
I want to ask you, because you said you've always sort of stayed motivated. I'm just really curious. This is I think a question you've probably received before, but if Daniel Negreanu didn't stumble into poker and completely dominate it, what would he be doing today?
Well, a lot of different options. I always felt like I'd be pretty good at whatever I did. And when I was very, very young, before I found poker, I thought I was going to grow up and be an actor and do television and write and create film and, that sort of stuff. I ended up being on camera for something very different with poker. But that was always something that was sort of a dream of mine as a kid. And then I found poker as a teenager and it just hooked me. And, we put the acting on hold forever.
Well, to be honest with you, I think you've been acting the whole time, right? I mean, those skill sets mirror each other to a large degree, right?
Sure. Yeah. It's funny you say that because I've played some celebrities and actors, and it's interesting how they naturally are good at bluffing and creating facial expression. Like I remember the first time Tobey Maguire got me. He got me in a game where there was a situation where, he'd made a bet of $3,000 and I started to count my money, right, to pay. And he almost turned his cards up, like to show me. So when someone does that, that means they're excited, they're happy, they have a very good hand. So I was like, aha, gotcha. I throw my hand away. He showed a complete bluff. So he acted his way into stealing a pot from me. So yeah, there's definitely a crossover.
That's amazing. Any can we stay on this for a second? Is there another maybe celebrity story where they got you or you got them, and it's just interesting because of the person who it was?
Well, there's been a lot of celebrities that have come and gone, and in poker, it's a pastime that's popular, and in LA home games and things like that. I'd say the best of them is Tobey Maguire. He's the one who really just fell in love with it more so than everybody else. I had an opportunity to play in his home game a couple of times with guys like Leonardo DiCaprio and stuff. And I remember one time playing like his chips at the Commerce because he went to the bathroom. He said, "You can play my cards." I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'll probably do fine with your money," and I won him a few thousand, I think. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't really play in those games much anymore. That was many years ago.
Are you still playing golf?
I haven't been golfing, but I plan to. It was snowing today here in Las Vegas. So
it's 90 degrees in Austin right now. We just had an ice storm a week ago.
Yeah. I was suntanning 2 days ago, and now it's
that's
do you follow golf? Because Pamela and I, we are analysts for the the PGA Tour among other outfits. Well, I should say among other sports. But I know golf. Pamela had mentioned that golf is something that you're interested in. Do you actually watch it and follow it? Have some players you bet on for that matter?
If I ever bet, I would ask my guy Christian, because Christian is a diehard, and Christian, I think that he might be one of 5 people in the world that has seen every one of Tiger Woods' shots and ever. He's a big fan of his. So when I did Tiger Jam and met Tiger, I brought Christian along because he was a big fan, and that was a big moment for him. But yeah, Christian's really, really smart and dialed in. So if I were to ever make some fun bets for any of the the majors, I would ask him, does this course play well for this guy, for that guy? He understands the game at a high level. And I think betting golf, and you guys obviously, do this, understanding how a course and how conditions are going to benefit or hurt somebody versus the line is where the real value is, right?
Mm-hmm.
You take a guy who just, isn't very long, but he's very, very accurate. Right. And then there's a course that's very narrow and there's tons of trouble. Well, all of a sudden his stock rises, right? He's like, oh, his driving distance is lowest on the tour, but look at the accuracy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's, I think that would be fun. Obviously, I mean, I imagine you guys enjoy it, but take it very seriously.
So it doesn't get lost in translation. Christian is one of his good friends who was his caddy, who I borrowed. So
yes.
I become his catch.
He's the loner. Yeah,
the loner caddy, and he did really, really good things. I wanted to ask you about golf and how it relates to what we do. Of course, we're betting it, but what was maybe a story or two on the golf course that you could tell us?
Well, I tell you what, my favorite form of gambling is golf because it's different than poker. In poker, you put your money in, you have to depend on the cards. In golf, it's you. Like, it's up to you. There's very little luck. There is some luck. You can hit a sprinkler head. You hit a drive, it hits a sprinkler head, it goes dead right. You hit a bird, it goes in the water, whatever. But like, ultimately, it really comes down to you. And I've had some really big bets. We had, multi-million-dollar bets in one spot. And this is kind of a long story, but I'll make it short. I had this huge. We were drinking one night, and I was terrible. This is when I just started golfing. I couldn't break 100 really. And so we were drinking, and someone said, "Okay, I bet you can't shoot 80 from the back tees at TPC Summerlin." I played the front tees, and I couldn't break 100. So that's a huge difference. And I only hit it with a driver like 200. That's it. I'm not very good. This is a very bad golfer. But we were drinking, so I made the bet. And then I had to travel to Europe and whatever, and I didn't really have a lot of time to play. So I had like a little over 4 weeks left, and I hadn't played. So me and Christian, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day. Practice for an hour, play 18, practice an hour, eat while I'm playing, play another 18, practice till dark, right? So that 115 started to get in the 90s and then whatever. And then all of a sudden, this one round, I'm like -2 through 7 somehow. And mind you, from these tees, I still can't hit any greens. So it's all about chipping and putting. I go into the last 4 holes needing to just make bogey, 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 bogey. And the first one's the easiest. So, of course, that's the one I double, right? And then I have 3 holes. I hit, driver, 3-wood. I have to chip and putt because I can't hit the greens. I make a beautiful 25-foot, snake putt. And now I have 2 holes left. Perfect drive, perfect 3-wood. And I'm a great chipper, but I shanked it. And now I left myself like a 100-foot 2-putt. Hit it 6 feet past the hole, made the comebacker. Last hole, there's 60 carts out. Everybody's watching because there's a lot of money on the line. And I do the same thing. Hit a drive down the middle, hit a 3-wood about 40 yards short because that's what I do. And now I'm just got to hit a nice little chip onto the green and get close and up and down. And of course, what do? I pull it again, and it's another 100-foot 2-putt. I hit it about 6 feet past the hole again. And this putt, I kid you not, as I lined up for the putt and the pressure was on, because it's this, I make it, I win, I miss, I lose after all this hard work. As I'm putting, I about fall to my knees as I'm hitting the ball. It starts to go to the right of the hole and then spins around the cup, drops in the hole.
Wow.
I was on my knees. Yeah. So I shot the 80 with about a week to spare. And that was probably my pinnacle achievement in golf.
That's amazing. And I think there's a lesson there, by the way. And I don't know if it was intended, but we've been talking this entire time and we hear, and I know Pamela does this too, but we hear you counting your calories and making sure you're sort of accountable to the meals you're going to eat every day. Make sure you plan it out. And then here you're practicing all the time, just to basically win this bet, but to also improve your golf game. And I think the lesson is, well, anybody can do that. Well, they might not be successful on the back end. They might not have shot that 80, but everybody can do what Daniel did. They can, right, Pamela? They can practice like you practiced to be.
You heard the same moral of the story as I did, 'cause that's what I was going to say.
No, I mean, and Pamela, speak to it because you've lived it quite recently.
Well, no, he basically said, what did he do every single day? He practiced from morning till dusk in order to get to improve on his game, and he went from 100 to an 80. That is a huge improvement. But what did he have to do in order to get there? Practice 12 hours a day. Why did I get good at tennis back in the day? Because I practiced every single day for 6 months. Why have I gotten good at bodybuilding? Because I show up every single day. Why have I gotten good at sports betting? Because I am working my ass off as soon as the sun comes up. Why is he good at poker? You heard that 10,000 hour rule, where if you want to be good at something, you just kind of like, okay, I'm going to do it every once in a while. Yeah, you're going to be good. If you want to be great at something, devote 10,000 hours in order for you to become great. Why am I not good at the banjo? Because I haven't put in 10,000 hours. I play once like a month and then I expect to be good. No, you have to put in the effort. And that's exactly what he's saying. You put in the effort.
We should make a banjo bet. We should make a banjo bet.
I would love to be part of a bet. You know how long I've been asking for somebody like, hey, Bill Perkins, make me a bet. I will crush it. I need a banjo bet. And the banjo's not in here because it didn't have space. It's in the other room. But yes, I need to devote hours in order to be great at something, and everybody can achieve that. Are you willing to put in the work? He was, and granted, it was motivated by a financial dollar, but I mean, it goes back to what's your motivation? Something has to motivate you in order to want to become good or even great at something.
And for the record, and Daniel, I only have a couple more questions for you, and maybe Pamela as well. But for the record, if you had shot an 81 or a 93, or maybe even a 99, to me, it's still a success, because the definition in this particular example of success is you actually putting the work in and getting better by some metric. So, I mean, I think we need to make sure we properly define success, and it's not necessarily the end point, the goal that we set at the beginning. Sometimes it's whatever goal ends up coming from that hard work.
Yeah, I used an example that I think is really like perfectly illustrates what you're talking about. And it comes from also like when you're goal setting or when you're trying to reach something, if you make your goal small, something that you're already going to achieve, you also somewhat limit, the potential there too. So for example, let's say John and Joe are both overweight and they say January 1st, we're going to lose weight. John says, you know what? I'm committed over the next 2 months to lose 5 pounds, right? Joe says over the next 2 months, I'm going to lose 20 pounds, right? 2 months later, John lost exactly 5 pounds like he said he would. He did what he said he would, right? Joe, he said he's going to lose 20 pounds. He didn't. He only lost 15, right? Who succeeded? Who failed here? They both succeeded, but they succeeded differently because one person put out a bigger stretch for themselves. So because they set themselves up with a goal that was a little more difficult, a little tastier, a little juicier, a little bit like, I don't know if I can do it. Okay. Well, the good news is even if you come up short, you far surpassed the other person who set a goal that was very easily attainable and modest. Now, again, listen, if that's who you are and that's, where you're comfortable, fine. But if you really want to push yourself to shoot 80, which is insane, then it might require, 13 hours a day of hitting golf balls.
One thing that I got from poker was that a lot of people have these prop bets in between themselves of like weight loss bets and this bet and that bet. But I never really saw that outside of poker. Like, I don't see that here in Texas. I don't see that in like the tech industry. I don't see that even in sports betting. Like, we wager on sports. I don't need to bet you to lose 10 pounds. Do you think something like that maybe like helps the rest of the world? This is what people should be doing? Personally,
I don't like it. Like, I know that a lot of poker players, like, I'm like, if you really want to lose weight, why don't you just do it? Do you really want to do it for $5,000? Is that really it? I actually know a guy. This is a true story. This was many years ago when I first started. This was like 20 years ago. This guy would purposely gain 50 pounds. He would purposely do it so that he can make weight bets with people.
Oh my gosh.
Like he's like, in 6 months, I got to lose 30 pounds. And he would do it over and over and over. And he would win like $50,000, $100,000. It was like he's making a living doing this. But for me, I've always felt like if your why is money, right? The reason you're doing it is for money. It won't be long lasting, right? It's not something that you want to change for a bigger reason, right? Let's say you have children and you're overweight and you worry about playing with them and you want to be for them, there for them. You want to be a good role model for them, right? There's much bigger, more important, juicy whys, I think, than just money. That should be something that you focus on. And I think that's typically what will be more long lasting.
What's your why? I like that.
I thought that was a question because I actually want to follow up, Daniel. What is your why?
Well, for me, I think ultimately, like with who I am in the world, if you will, I've always felt like I kind of I get off on inspiring people, right? Yeah. Like the story of the woman who dropped the soda and the cigarettes and lost all that weight. I like to be somebody who lives his life in such a way that proves to other people that if you work hard, you can achieve your dreams. So that's like a constant, being the best version of myself that I always try to work on. And I'm not always there. I have my bad days. I'm a jerk too. I'm cankerous and all that stuff, when I need to be. I'm a flawed human being just like we all are. But I think for me, my why is also to be healthy and live a long life and, we're looking to raise a family and all that kind of stuff and be a good father, be a good role model to, to children on the way and things like that. But yeah, for me, it's about, the real juice of life is giving in some way. And I think giving people inspiration is what gets me off.
It's really, truly, Daniel, like the reason I thought you were such a good guest for this show, and Pamela thought that as well, because these are the types of people that you are the type of person that inspires others. But I do want to ask you, I can't let anybody go without asking the following question. And it might come down to who has inspired you in your life. But if there were 3 people that you could thank right now for making a huge impact in your life or inspiring you or just being there for you, however you want to contextualize that question, and they could be living or now past, who would those 3 people be?
Well, I'm gonna break this into 2. It's my parents. I was very blessed, right? So like we talk about, the word privilege. And I was as privileged as you can possibly imagine, very European upbringing. Mother and father stayed together. Dad worked hard. Mom stayed home with us, old school. I had everything that I needed. They taught me what love is. They taught me about generosity. They taught me about how to be a good host, how to be a friendly person, and, and be giving. And so like everything about how I was shaped, I owe to them. Another person I think of when I first started coming to Las Vegas, who really sort of showed me the ropes and sort of kept me down the right path, was a woman named Jennifer Harmon, who's a professional poker player, who saw me making all these mistakes that a young buck will make. And I was fortunate enough to, to befriend her and, have a chance to really, learn there. And then finally, I would have to go with my wife, Amanda, because I think it all comes down to this. Like, I'm a believer, like, well, it's obviously not true for everybody. I think in your 20s or even younger, you might not think so, but you really care what other people think about you. You really, really do, right? In your 30s, you start to say, well, you don't think people care about you, but you still kind of do, right? In your 40s, I pretty much have reached I don't give a fuck level, right? And part of that is I've achieved, like, through my wife, because she's big on authenticity, right? She's like, just be you. Who cares? Don't try to appease people. Just be yourself. And if you're pissed off, be pissed off. And we have a love and a bond that is more valuable to me than anything else. Like, if I were to be, ostracized or canceled or, shunned from society, I've got my dream life. So it allows me the freedom to sort of live it in such a way that's truly authentic. And again, sometimes living an authentic life is going to rub some people the wrong way. But that's a choice for you, right? Do you want to live your life in such a way where you do nothing, say nothing, be nothing, which is a quote of someone's, or do you want to live it where you risk sometimes rustling some feathers and being okay with that? And I've always been comfortable, like, talking about how I believe things are or whatever, and sharing my views, and realizing that, that's probably not the ideal idea from a branding perspective, right? Like Michael Jordan said many, many years ago, something like Republicans buy shoes too, or something like that. But yeah, I'm not, that's what I'd say. I owe her for really making me feel free to be me.
You mentioned your wife, Amanda. Earlier you mentioned that you wanted to be a good father. Did I miss that you had a baby, or you're maybe
No, we
expecting?
don't have a baby yet. We're gonna
Okay.
we're,
I'm
we're
trying to
gonna
Google frantically, like, when did he?
no, we're working on it. We're working on it.
Okay. Aw, Papa Negreanu. It's gonna be.
No, I mean, Pamela, that's pretty much all I have for Daniel. The problem is, Daniel, I could literally consume this space with you for a few hours, because I know a lot of people want to hear so many different poker stories, but I think the goal of what Pamela and I wanted to do today was really kind of bring out Daniel Negreanu, the person, as opposed to the poker player. Anything we missed in that regard?
I think we did a good job covering the gamut. Yeah, I mean, I think we did. I mean, and I appreciate the interview, because it's fun sometimes to just kind of have a chat, right, about life rather than, the ins and outs of poker.
Well, then let's have a chat about that banjo bet.
Okay.
I need something to motivate me for this, honestly.
I'm not a banjo fan, so I do not want to make a banjo bet.
Ugh,
A
Steve Martin.
guitar? Well, why not the guitar, Pamela? The
I'm
guitar's
sorry?
cool. Why not the guitar?
So my grandfather is a musician. Everyone in my family knows how to play something. I just gravitated to the banjo. I'm obsessed with it. Steve Martin is one of my favorite people. The Dixie Chicks from back in the day. She, when the banjo player on that group, she is amazing. It's just a sound that I am obsessed with. While people are listening to, I don't know, like whatever music at the gym, I tend to listen to like banjo sometimes, banjo solos, because it's. I think it's beautiful. I think it's awesome, and it is a tough instrument to play. So every time I get into it, I stick with it for a couple of months, and then something sports happens.
Interesting. I've never heard that type of liking to the banjo, but you bring up music. I promise this is the last question. Daniel, your favorite group, favorite music group, or musical artist, or like the go-to, whether you're having a jog or you just need to get in the right mindset.
Well, lifetime, my favorite is always going to be Bob Marley and the Wailers, right? I just grew up with it. I was always into reggae as a kid. I would say of the latest ones, because this is a new group, and I don't know, I'm not really a big music person. My wife, Amanda, is, but the group, I love them. They remind me of the Red Hot Chili Peppers in a lot of ways, and they're called Måneskin. They won that show Eurovision or something like that. They're an Italian rock band, which isn't even my genre. I'm like a reggae rap guy, and these guys do like, I'm sure you've heard some of their music if you haven't, but you've definitely heard it. I don't want to sing it. I'm not a singer. Måneskin, Maneskin. Yeah, yeah.
I'll look them up.
Yeah, you should.
And Daniel, before we get out of here, where can we find you? I know you've got the masterclass up there, and I know you still have your YouTube channel that's very active, right?
Yeah, my YouTube channel. If you type my name in, I'm sure you can find it. Masterclass.com is where I did sort of a in-depth poker course, if you will, that a lot of people really, really enjoyed. It was really well received. And then, of course, on Twitter, that's where I'm most active, which is Real Kid Poker. I do Instagram, but hardly ever. I'm just my Amanda. She's right here right now. It's like I suck at Instagram. She's like I post a picture and it's blurry. I'm like,
guilty. Same thing with me.
Yeah.
Same thing with me. I totally get it. I'm a Twitter guy. I don't get Instagram. There's like I don't know where to go with Instagram.
Yeah. I've never had a TikTok and don't ever plan to. So.
Fair enough. All right. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for the time. We really, really appreciate you. Everybody go follow Daniel if you're not already. You probably already are. Definitely subscribe to Pamela's YouTube page, which is Stack of Stats, and mine, Sia and Nejad Sports. We're going to have a lot more content coming to you. But Daniel, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the time you gave us and the perspective you gave us as well.
Well, it was a blast, guys. I appreciate it.
Awesome.
Peace out.